We've all seen videos about oh gaming has changed, and it has. But the spice of this video is that I'm gonna look at it through the lens of Hideo Kojima's directing career with the Metal Gear Solid series, while we move through these different eras in gaming. But firstly, let's talk about Kojima's empire. He's mostly known for his convoluted storytelling and extremely long cutscenes, because he's a movie head and anime head. But in his heart, he's a gamer. His games have always bended the line between gameplay and story so well, from the famous Psycho Mantis boss fight to his later games like Metal Gear Solid 4, in which old Snake is having back problems and can't crouch all the time. I'd like to call the 80s and 90s the arcade era in gaming. The Donkey Kongs, the Pac-Mans, the Italian plumber named
Mario!
You get the point. In this era, too existed the early age PCs like the MSX2, which had the first game of the series named Metal Gear. This was Kojima's first game directing, and it did pretty well in Japan and some parts of Europe. It sold around 1 million units. Damn. So they let them make the sequel, Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, for the MSX2 in 1990. It was on the top 30 most sold MSX games for 6 months, and even finished first in its 4th month of release. These are really good numbers for back in the day. All retro magazines were praising it, and even IGN noted its stealth mechanics like crawling, enemies patrolling, and enemies being able to hear you. Yes, Kojima is the pioneer of today's basic stealth game mechanics.
Con alegría, con alegría.
The late 90s and 2000s era could have been called the creative age of gaming. We had the GTAs, the Silent Hills, the Resident Evils, and one-off games like Shadow of Colossus, and many more. For Kojima and Metal Gear Solid series, it was about the first 3 Metal Gear Solid games: Metal Gear Solid 1, Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty, and Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake. He apparently added the Solid part into the Metal Gear because Snake is now in 3D. He's truly an early age memester.
That was perfect.
These 3 games, for its time, were peak stealth action gameplay. Games like Assassin's Creed, Tom Clancy, hell, the whole stealth action genre wouldn't be what it is right now if these games never existed. And not only it had its James Bond inspired stories and sequences, it dabbled into some topics ahead of its time: AI, information age, social engineering, and memes. But what did all this mean for Kojima? Well, he's now in his prime of career and decides to create Kojima Productions, his own gaming studio. And now he's free to explore every project that he wants. Or is he? You see, the mid to late 2000s era was the beginning of a new era in gaming, the corporate era. Gaming was turning heads back in the arcade era. Pac-Man was soloing Hollywood back in the day, and currently, gaming is bigger than Hollywood and music industry combined. But what do I mean by the corporatization of gaming? In order to understand that, we need to go back to the 2000s era, Activision, and Call of Duty. In the beginning, Call of Duty was all about showing the true horrors of war, while weaving in their own fictional narratives. They would go out of their way to ask veterans about their experience. They would even go out of their way and consult them about the sounds of weapons they used to hear back in the war. Now, how was Activision able to give out all these games 1 year apart. It had two smaller child studios, Treyarch and Infinity Ward. They gave out so many games per year until they hit the jackpot with the Modern Warfare 2 series in 2009 and continued this wave of success with Black Ops series, though their games started becoming a little bit bland after that. But then they decided to reboot the Modern Warfare series to bring back some life to the series, and they were somewhat successful. But let's not go on a side tangent. In this new environment, big companies would buy smaller studios, and now the market is within the grasp of a few big companies. And now, because of sheer manpower, they will produce faster and arguably better games than their rivals. This big change in the landscape also had effects on the consumers' expectations. They wanted games, and if it did good, they wanted a sequel. Fast. Some people might say, oh, don't use words like product and consumer. Gaming is an expression of art. And actually, I do agree with that. But we have to accept the fact that gaming has become a systemized industry from top to bottom. Just look at IGN. Before it was about reviewing games and rating them. But now some guy in IGN plays a game for 8 hours and puts out a video on YouTube, because the earlier you put a review about a new game, the more views you get. Just like big companies which their main value has become money and then quality, because you have to attract the money giver somehow, so too changed IGN's values. Monetary gain over everything else. Now we need to go back to Kojima and 2001. In Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty, 1/10 into the game, Kojima decides to switch up the main protagonist of the game from Solid Snake to Raiden. And in the game's final cutscenes, Snake tells Raiden to break himself free from the system and start a life of his own way of life. Okay, why are you telling us all this? You see, Kojima's stories are full of meta-narratives. Kojima saw Snake as an extension of himself, and Kojima would have been happy if Metal Gear Solid 2 was his last. Kojima was a firm believer of the younger generation, so he was essentially telling Raiden to free himself from the Metal Gear Solid series and become something more than MGS. And he did, but that's another story. But of course, Kojima understands that MGS is very important to Konami, so he saw MGS3 Snake Eater as a way to teach everything about MGS to younger generation developers. So after MGS3, he went and created games like Boktai series and Zone of Ender's Second Runner with Kojima Productions. And another team worked on Konami's new PlayStation 3 game, MGS4, Guns of the Patriots. But things didn't go well in the Konami camp. So much so that they asked back Kojima and his team to work on MGS4. And well, MGS is Kojima's baby, and plus Kojima Productions was still a child studio from Konami, so he was somewhat forced to do it. No, Kojima isn't. Yes, this is Konami speaking. MGS game developed by Kojima? Of course we have it. But Kojima is a professional. And what is the most professional act in this scenario? To kill the entire series forever. Of course, I'm memeing for your affirmations, likes, and subscriptions. But MGS4 was meant to be the last Metal Gear Solid game. But this cycle didn't end. It continued for games like MGS Peace Walker, MGS Ground Zeroes, and MGS5 Phantom Pain. And these frictions continued until the development of MGS5 Phantom Pain finished. And after that, the big news came that Kojima left Konami. And the signs were already there. You see, Kojima produced a demo game called MGS5 Ground Zeroes for the new Phantom Pain game. But Konami wanted a bunch of cash, so they sold this 8-hour game. Plus, there were a lot of rumors that MGS5 had a lot of cut content inside it because Konami wanted it to be produced a lot faster. But of course, Kojima is a professional and he always denied these rumors and said that MGS5 Phantom Pain is a full game. But after a few years, Konami finally showed its true face by producing an awful game called MGS Survive. Its gameplay consisted of building a cage and stabbing zombies in their head. Plus, if you wanted extra save slots, you had to pay them for that. And this is the end of Kojima's saga with the MGS series. But there is a secret era that I didn't talk about, the indie era in gaming. One of the reasons why a lot of smaller studios used to sell themselves to bigger studio was that, well, creating games was extremely expensive, plus publishing it was really hard too. But now there are huge gaming markets like the Steam market, which a lot of indie games can go and sell their games over there. Plus, we have seen these extremely strong gaming engines which are open sourced. So now big companies can't hoard all these really good engines to themselves. So Kojima went and pursued his own project named what? Named Death Stranding, which it did well. Well, everybody described it as a walking simulator. You see, Kojima games always were able to divide the population. A lot of people loved it, and the other half didn't understand jack shit about it. But I believe that these kinds of people have the power to push the gaming industry into a better direction. And now that a lot of indie studios are producing awesome games, the future of gaming is a lot brighter than people make it out to be. In the end, we probably will never get another MGS game from Kojima. But I'd rather have a bittersweet ending to the story rather than a extremely sad one. And talking about sad stories, copyright strikes suck. You see, my past video got copyright claimed and I get all my views from the home page because I don't got subscribers. So sub if you like this video and check out my past video about Death Note and Fight Club. You might like it. Oh, and one last thing. You're pretty good.